Hello, this is a quick video talking about my recent project for the A3D module on my university course. Let's start with the idea behind the project. With my focus being animation, I wanted to do something in that particular area, and I decided that the best option for that was to revisit a project I attempted over the summer and never finished. That project was to take a popular fictional character and create an animation rig based on a toy of that figure. Now, the reason behind that idea is because, as much as I enjoyed the full rigging process from starting the model to adding extra controls, I absolutely hate skin weighting. More specifically, I hate having to smooth and blend the weight on a model between bones, like the inside of the elbow or the shoulder clavicle area. If the character was in toy form, like a plastic action figure for example, then the majority of the skinning process would consist of weighting entire meshes to one bone only, minimalising the need to blend between two or more areas of the same mesh. I started off by making a prototype to better demonstrate and figure out exactly what it was I wanted to achieve. I've come to call this prototype Blanco. It's a simple nondescript biped character with the simple features and controls. There's also a bare bones facial rig consisting of eye controls based around swapping out Alfred planes curved to fit the face using set-driven keys. This is to give the face an almost stop-motion look, which I felt appropriate considering that stop-motion animations almost always feature action figure characters. Whilst I was making this rig, I ran a series of polls over Facebook and around the university campus to decide what characters I would be making my toy rig of. I started with one poll on Facebook asking people who they'd like to see made into an action figure. Then I took that list of characters, some I was completely unfamiliar with, and went throughout the university grounds asking people who they'd like to see out of those characters be turned into an action figure. And after a long-standing tie for the top spot, eventually that character ended up being Spyro the Dragon, the main character from a popular video game series in the mid to late 90s. On week 3 I began to make the model for the character. I was a little stuck to begin with and I had no idea exactly where to start. I had a little experience making character models before, but none of them were dragons or action figures based on dragons, so this was entirely new ground for me. I tried looking for turnaround images of Spyro on the internet. They were difficult to use, either having conflicting sizes or proportions on every view, or missing out key areas. Luckily, I found a user on the art community site DeviantArt who had created a royalty-free character rig for Spyro for the 3D program Blender. I downloaded the rig, removed the bones and controls, and exported the leftover model to Maya in hopes of using it as reference, kind of like a 3D stencil of sorts. The modelling process took me until week 8 to finish. This is due partially to a bit of data loss, which is the clinical term for did a full day's work and then forgot to save any of it on more than one day. A bigger difficulty was creating the articulation for the shoulder and hip areas. I had to make sure the joints I used could give the right amount of freedom to bring the legs forward, backwards, and rotate freely across all axes, and to do all this without clipping against any of the other body pieces. I found 2 artists on the internet who actually make articulated quadruped figures as a trade, and that gave me some ideas. I did my best to emulate those techniques in the modelling Spyro. It worked in some areas, but the tail and wings in particular required a bit more creative freedom. Having these areas as separate pieces linking together worked in theory, but were either aesthetically insufficient or very limiting in the freedom for articulation. To fix this, I decided to change these areas entirely. The tail ended up being a whole piece with smoothed out skinning to replicate the look of a rubber tail that's posed with an internal wire. And the wings have plastic pieces to articulate the spines, and what is supposed to be cloth on the webbing in between. This means I had to break from my goal of keeping this model completely hard surface and avoid smooth skin weighting, but in the end it's a compromise that worked out for the best. From then I started to actually rig the model and create the controls, and these were finished by week 10. With only 2 weeks to actually rig the model, I didn't have time to create all of the features I'd planned. Some more common features like the IK-FK switching for limbs had to be scrapped, though I was able to add IKs for the idle loop in the final cinematic, as they weren't meant to move, so it was easier to stick in there for that one pose. Another feature that had to be scrapped was the facial rigging I had planned. I'd modelled the head in 2 pieces so I could make alternatives that could be swapped out and animated, like the stop-motion style facial rig on Blanco. With the deadline pressing, this had to be scrapped, and I didn't have the time to model and texture all the alternate pieces. The finished rig is now very basic, FK only as a result, but my animations prove they are sufficient enough to animate for basic purposes. Odds are the original Spyro rig from the first game was FK only anyway, given the technology at the time of the PS1's popularity. And there we have it. There isn't really much else to talk about for this project. I mean, nothing noteworthy anyway. There was one moment where I decided to swear off making animation rigs altogether, but that was just a moment of stressed student madness. Anyway, thank you for listening to this short discussion of my process behind this project, and I hope you enjoy this final cinematic. Take care.